Welcome everybody to, is this our 25th or 24th in a series of artist professional development workshops dating back to last August. It's August of 2020. And in the recent months, we've been featuring artists who have completed projects over the last few years with the Office of Arts and Culture. And today, we're delighted to be joined by Laura Haddad and Tom Drugan. And I'll introduce them in a moment, but I'd like to introduce our staff who've been helping to put these together for the last year and so issue some thanks here. Katie Bayaris, who can wave to the crowd, got these started back in August with the Public Art 101 series. Doug Oland is our collections manager. He takes care of all of the great works that get done through the Public Art program. And then Barry Sparkman is one of our project managers, and he has shepherded some of these projects through design and completion. So that's our crew, and as I said, this is the 24th or thereabouts in a series that started last August. And before I introduce Laura and Tom, Katie, I'd like to have you say a few words about what the process will be today, if people have questions and those sorts of things, and then I'll bounce it back to me.
Yeah, as we go through today's presentation, I just ask that everybody keep themselves muted during the presentation, except for Tom and Laura as they're presenting. We are going to be recording this so that it will live on YouTube for those who couldn't join us today. And that just keeping yourself on mute helps us with that sound quality. And then if you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box and we will go through all the questions at the end.
Well, thanks very much, Katie. As I mentioned, our guests and featured performers today are Laura Haddad and Tom Drugan. Their collaboration as an artist team began in 2001 and has fostered a wide range of innovative site-specific public art projects and plans. Their studio, Haddad Drugan, combines art, architecture, landscape, and theater, and includes collaborators adept at detail design, computer modeling and drafting, physical modeling and graphics. And they specialize, I would say, in creating conceptually driven site-specific art that's often integrated into large-scale infrastructure projects. And just some examples of their past work includes art for stormwater utilities, transportation projects, architectural facades, industrial artifacts, museums, libraries, urban plazas, and parks. And their award-winning work has been published in sculpture. You'll see it in Architectural Record, or Landscape Architecture, EcoStructure, Landscape Journal, Land Forum, and many, many more. And today, one of the things they'll be talking about is their recently completed 107th Avenue Streetscape project, which is 107th Avenue between Camelback Road and Indian School Road right here in Phoenix. And with that, I'm delighted to turn it over to Laura and Tom, and look forward to hearing and seeing your presentation.
Great.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ed. So we'll go ahead and pull up the presentation here.
So you said optimize, right?
I think that's fine. There should be that's right there, the PowerPoint. You don't need to do that.
Okay.
Sure. I pulled the video off. That's all right.
All right. So
Can everybody see the big Haddad Drugan?
yeah.
All right, great. So thanks, Ed, again for the great introduction. So you covered kind of a big overview of who we are, but Laura and I have been collaborating, I think, about 20 years now, and we do a wide range of projects. So today we're gonna talk mostly about the 107th Avenue project, which we've entitled Uplift. You'll see why when we get to it, but first we wanted, as a kind of introduction to ourselves and our work, just kind of highlight a few of our projects, some that we've recently completed, and then some other ones. And then I'll get into the 107th artwork and go through the community input, research, and inspiration, the conceptual design process and design development, and then into fabrication and installation. I'll highlight come up some of the like sort of details and challenges that we had. Thought that would be illuminating and kind of take everybody through the whole process. I want to give special thanks to the Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture and Elizabeth, who recently retired, was instrumental in getting this project complete. I think we were going for about 5 years on it. So with delays and complexities and integrating with a lot of different public entities, connecting with the community was huge in this project, really led to a lot of inspirations. And of course, Ed there the entire time shepherding the project through completion. And then with COVID, obviously, the having them there on site when we couldn't be for the installation was huge, and also doing some visits to the fabrication shop when we weren't allowed to travel. So that was amazing help. And then, of course, Magnum was the fabricator on this, and man, those guys are fantastic, and kind of just getting into doing whatever needed to be done to get the work as complete and as best it could. So I just wanted to start by just saying that, you know, Laura and I were always kind of drawn to doing site-specific artwork, and we really get into the specifics of a place and a place's culture and kind of draw inspiration from that. So our art ends up being many different forms, many different styles, use of materials, use of lighting varies with each project. So it's exciting, but it also can be a lot of work. But Laura's going to run through a few of the projects. Oh, first, let me highlight just a couple of things we just recently completed. This is in Jacksonville, Florida. So it was an existing parking garage that was kind of the entry into downtown Jacksonville. So we did a large kind of mural piece that was kind of a blend of mural and sculpture. And then highlighted by this large kind of sculptural sort of jellyfish flower thing on the top that's all illuminated. And so I didn't add any video here, but the whole thing is constantly changing in color and lighting effects throughout the year. So it basically creates a new gateway into downtown Jacksonville. Another project that we recently completed in last year was out in Denver, near the Denver airport. It's a light rail station, but also the beginning of a new kind of sort of techy, environmentally sustainable community out there. So this is at the light rail plaza, which is sort of the first thing built. And it's called Luminous Wind, and each of these rods also has works kind of capturing the light in different ways during the day. But then at night, we feed video graphics and color changes throughout all these 1,000 rods, creating this amazing kind of beacon for this future city that's being built now. So just a close-up detail of it. And one more, this project we did a few years ago, but this is, you know, it seems like more of the opportunities lately have been sort of to create sort of an iconic work that kind of draws people to places. So this was a new riverfront park plaza that they were building. And so we built this sculpture here that kind of would be a beacon for people from downtown to come down to the new riverfront park. Mirror stainless on the riverside, and then different changes of materials on the front side. And again, using different illuminating effects, going to get a flowing river effect on the downtown facing side. Oops.
Oh, I think.
Yeah, looks like it jumped a little bit.
Yeah, I think I think we may need to do it this way. Just flip through because of the way these are animating or advancing. Anyway, you can just flip through like this.
Okay. So again, a couple shots. So this is based on the meander of the Cumberland River, which is kind of I mean, Nashville is originally in a river town, and so this was kind of its reason for being. And being the riverfront park, this is what we were really enamored by, this kind of meandering river form. So we use that as the sculptural form. And one interesting thing on the lighting effects, we really tapped into this changing colors and quality of light in the river. It changes per season depending on the type of runoff, and of course then the time of day with sunrises, sunsets, night lights. And so we picked up on these color palettes and sort of used them in the sculpture to kind of inform the composition of light changes. And I'll let Laura jump in and do a couple of projects too.
Yeah, so you know, we have worked in the Phoenix area before in Scottsdale. This project began, this was one of our earlier projects, and it is a highly integrated earthwork and sculptural gargoyle piece that is illuminating the process of flowing stormwater through the Indian Bend Wash in Scottsdale. So we were brought on at the very beginning to work with the structural and civil engineers to kind of figure out where art would work in this really often very still environment, but at times very turbulent. So on one side of this new bridge, we created these 5 14-foot high aluminum horse gargoyles, and then water flows around and through them under the bridge, and then slows down when it reaches the basin with the sculptural earthworks. We had tried to do a lot of planting, but the stormwater would have kind of annihilated it. So we created some berms and walls that encase plants and also measure the changing stormwater levels. So here is the basin full, and you can see the water lines measuring the changing level, and then it kind of gradually moves out into a mesquite grove. And the water recedes, and it's, you know, kind of a changing environment after a storm, supports wildlife. And then on the opposite side, these gargoyles are kind of the sentinels, and they're referencing also the McCormick Arabian horse ranch was here in the early 20th century. So a little nod to that. And then, you know, car icons and other elements were the inspiration. So we typically have these sculptures fabricated, and in this by others. In this case, it was in Massachusetts, so we had to truck them cross country, and we're always trying to figure out how to fit these sculptures onto trucks as part of the beginning of the process. We worked with the general contractor who installed the artwork, as well as built these concrete plinths and all of the walls that were on the opposite side of the bridge. So just some different effects with water and sunlight. Oh, and then this brings us to our other large animal project. This is in Denver. This piece is called Sunspot, and you know, similar to Watermark in Scottsdale, it's a kind of a roadside attraction. It's an icon that draws you from a distance, but then as you get up closer to it, you realize that it has a lot of these kind of sparkly environmental effects that in this case are caused by we have 90,000 stainless steel pet tags on this piece. So inspired by the river, the water, reflecting sunlight. Again, working with fabricators who built it in the shop and then trucked it and installed it. So anyway, this is I think one of our favorite pieces because it really is beloved and creates this fun photo op and engages the community. Lighting at night activates it. The lights go through sunset colors. And then inside, there's a large collar that is sized to fit the dog. And then suspended from that are pet tags that are engraved with the names of animals that have been adopted or passed on. And then lastly, along the river, these tags are marking the names of native plants that are growing there, kind of a conflating like animal stewardship with natural stewardship. And then the last project I'm going to talk about is the cloud here in Seattle or south of Seattle at the Angle Lake Station. This is another kind of sunlight and LED light activated piece that creates this iconic cloud image at a elevated light rail station. So it's really kind of drawing on the natural surroundings, the way the east and west light backlighted and front lighted. It's changing a lot at different times of day. And then these discs are hanging on cables where they're moving in the wind, and it is quite windy up there, so there's usually some motion. So it kind of has a sparkly, flickery effect. And then I think, similar to Sunspot, where you get up close and you kind of get lost in the pet tags here, when you're on the platform, it's more of a experience of the light and color of the discs, and you lose the cloud shape. So yeah, so these artworks kind of change depending on where you're looking at them. And then LEDs at night. So now Tom's gonna walk through the uplift process and piece.
Yeah, and I do have a lot of slides, but I'll try. Some of them I'll go through pretty quickly. But so yeah, it was kind of fun, like digging back in and going through the steps, that we went through. Just kind of so Laura and I, went out early on and really got a feel for the site and the context. Did a lot of exploring and researching. And really the focus of the project was this entire length of 107. So part of the challenge was, where does the art go, or is it,
The focal points.
Yeah, focal points of it. Is it a series of really small pieces that stretch the entire way, or do we kind of create gateways? And here you can see, so the project itself, it was interesting because I believe it was a community initiated process where they had an open kind of irrigation ditch running alongside the road. But I think there was cars that were going into it and mosquitoes and other issues they had with it, maintaining it. So they were able to get it piped and covered, and then that's when the city came in and did a whole streetscape enhancement project to it in tandem with the moving utilities and working with the irrigation districts on the cut and covering the pipes. So we did several community meetings in the early part, and really this was incredibly helpful, guiding us to kind of what is it about the neighborhood and the place that really resonated. So that gave us kind of a finer grain understanding of the community. And I'll get into inspirations and stuff that kind of came out of some of that community dialogues that we had. So here's some of the inspiration. So obviously for us coming from Seattle, just the ability to tap into your ample sunshine was a great opportunity. So we definitely, and we heard a lot about this, could we create shade, and shade structures was part of the goal, that whatever the art is, that it does provide some refuge from sun, especially during the hot times. And 107th is on the far side of Phoenix, and so you're kind of up against the desert, starting to meet the foothills. So this was also a very prominent part of the community's desire to kind of, a lot of people live out there because it's close proximity to the kind of wilder edge of the city. We got really interested in kind of the historical development over time of the space. There's still 107th, you still have a mix of agriculture mixed with newer developments and communities going in, going deep into the kind of history of the irrigation. Was interesting. And I think this is the early agricultural history was something we were looking at. And this idea that the irrigation canals also kind of served as de facto kind of parkways, because the trees would grow along the wet areas, and they became kind of the refuge or oasis in a way for the communities over time. And of course, I think one of the big influences is just the exotic natural landscape, the desert plants and the kind of crazy forms and colors that we see there. We were really enamored by kind of tapping into that kind of form, color, look. So you'll see when we get to the sculpture, kind of those early influences, how they kind of got into the design. And of course, we're near the the river out there. And so there's a lot of bird activity, and I think a lot of people in the community noted that. And so we were really enamored by the different types of bird species that were out there. And of course, the dust devil was really interesting. And we experienced some of these when we were on site, small ones as the wind would kick up and you'd get these amazing swirling dust clouds. Another big influence on the community out there was Luke Air Force Base. So training ground, for those who don't know, it's a training area for F-16s and now more recently F-35s. And we really were interested in sort of this tie between the bird life and the jets and their flight patterns and maneuvers. So we kind of got into trying to capture something that could sort of play with these ideas and form and sculptural form. So so here you can see some contrails of the different planes, of course the Thunderbirds and their aerial maneuvers. So from all those inspirations, we went through lots of early ideas and kind of started to gravitate into this idea of doing these kind of sculptural grove. So we began playing, as we often do, in physical model form first, sketches, and then physical model form, and kind of started to come up with this idea of like a kind of spatial experience of individual stocks that kind of are sculptural pieces that all could kind of work together from different views and vantages. Some early sketches, and then similar to that cloud sculpture, we really loved the idea that given all the sunshine there, we could use these colorful discs, and these would be almost like these organic kind of plants that kind of would sculpturally form to kind of the flight maneuvers of birds and jets. And so that was kind of the genesis of the main ideas here. And then also the idea that a cluster of them can kind of create a grove that's almost like an oasis. So we had these early ideas about, how could we make these things spin and kind of be activated by the wind, which kind of kicks up now and then down there. And so kind of with the wind, like on the cloud sculpture, that kind of creates like these shimmery and interesting effects that have the piece kind of change and be a little bit alive during the breezy, windy times. And then this idea that, at the tip of these sculptures, we could have these jets or birds. And so that was an idea that kind of stuck and we refined over time. So here, then we started putting it into computer models so we could kind of explore the forms and different ways and contexts. And I think we came out and shared a couple different options with the community early on at these kind of conceptual stages and got their feedback. So here you can see this kind of idea of these forms. I remember one of the big challenges was all the various setbacks that were required, not just from the road, but the irrigation district has very set limits. A lot of this area, this big swath of land was actually controlled by them. So that was interesting. Everything we did would get reviewed through their process.
Well, I think what was interesting is the site, it was so wide and it seemed like there was so much space to put anything anywhere. But when it came down to it, all of the underground utilities and right-of-ways really actually limited the possible locations.
Yeah, setbacks, you had to be set back a certain distance from the road, and you also had to be set back a certain distance from the irrigation district's access road, and that left kind of this strip where we could build, even though if you're out there, it's like you feel like you have 100 feet of width, but in reality, that was not the case. So this was another option. Then we started looking more at these kind of aerial flight patterns. And so I think we started to go more this direction, as you'll see. So this option B, and then starting to put some color on it and think about the color. This was just sort of random color at this point. So here again, a different option. So again, we went through with the community. We went through many, ideas about where the art might best be suited, and it seemed like sort of the center of gravity was up by the up by the park here, which we found was a really nice kind of sort of main kind of community gathering spot, the park. And so people pass through this kind of part, this area every day. And then also we had this desire that, you know, if possible, could we at least get something down on the other end, so it kind of marks like a gateway into the community from both sides. So we were able to do one stock piece down on the other side, as well as the grove in the end. So from that conceptual design stuff, we began, you know, more playing in model form, and that's when we really kind of got into, you know, these bigger swoops of form that I think are really dynamic. And we started working with the engineer to see how much cantilever we could get, and kind of maximizing kind of the structural ability to kind of make these as wide as possible. So here you can kind of see, and then at some point we started developing the color palette and thinking about it, kind of fades of color would be more dynamic and interesting than just random color. So and then began looking in model form. We could actually project the sunlight over time and look at the how the shade would cast down, and strategically try to place some seating in the shadiest areas. So this is a structural engineer. They took it into model form, and they could actually study the stresses of the materials with wind loads, and find out where the weak points are, and then from that we were able to, you know, further move the design forward and kind of try to find the size material that kind of best works sculpturally and with the radiuses that we used. And we ended up kind of developing sort of a kit of parts. So these there's a certain number of types of pieces that were assembled in various ways. So that kind of maximized how we could kind of make the most variety sculpturally within, you know, the budget to kind of get as many of these as we could for a grove. So through the design process, we went through many iterations on how the discs could move. Lots of mock-ups. That little detail was a challenge, but we finally, working with Magnum, we actually found a great solution with their help. So, and of course, then you know, the birds and jets. So the F-16, the F-35, and 3 different area birds of prey, hawks. That in different formations are kind of what we settled on for the different birds. Again, we went through lots of different options on what these could be. And then as part of the process, you know, once we got Magnum on board, then they do their shop drawings. And so then you start to get into another level of design, figuring out, you know, what's the most practical way to build things that you know, we sort of take it to one level, and then we take it into another level when it gets to the fabricators, and then they produce their own drawings that they actually build from, and then here just refining the color palette using the real materials and testing those and looking at those in model form. And then this also kind of, we could figure out the exact counts of how many we needed and where they went. So this then becomes a kind of blueprint in a way for what colors go where when it comes to fabrication and installation. So once Magnum started working, the first thing they did was mock-up. So this again is this detail of the spinner. So we went through several variations of this, and until we got something that worked really well. And I'll have to hand it to them. They really were ingenious in kind of developing this whole through shaft idea that we hadn't even thought of. So it was a great collaboration there. They sub out. There's only a few places in the country that can roll a material this heavy. So they had a company out of California do like the basic rolling of the structural steel tube. And then that company, they couldn't quite do what they thought they could do. So they tried to seam it together, and it was not working out for them. So Magnum had to go in and cut out all their bad kind of splicing and areas that weren't smooth curved pieces, and they cut them all out. And they kudos to them for really caring and taking the time and cost to kind of redo the smooth rails to get them all like very sinuousy and into the right shapes. So they did an amazing job on getting these things all cleaned up. And then, we did get to, it was pre-COVID, so we got to go down and visit the fabrication shop several times through the development, getting these pieces all kind of wrapped up. One of the interesting things was, okay, we had this shaft idea on the discs and how they can move, and so then to create that, they actually had to create a custom jig to kind of figure out how to drill those holes, kind of so they kind of spiral up on the piece. So it was kind of an interesting problem, but again, great fabricators can come up with really creative solutions for doing these type of things. So you can kind of see how these, each of these kind of shaft points kind of spirals up the spiral. So, and there you see kind of a completed one with all the different shaft points. And then of course, putting the vertical shafts on and base plates. They did mock-ups of different options for the jets and birds, and from that, and I think it was a discussion we had in one of our visits, and they said, we could make these stainless and mirrored, and we like, we didn't know that was even possible to do for the budget, and we all agreed that would be the best way to go. So it turned out really well. Again, getting all the discs, and this was sort of a puzzle, but putting them on in the shop to check them out. And when we were down there, they had a top piece done, so we lifted it to the actual height so we could kind of see how it looked in kind of real situation. Again, some of the effects of the light and the color were really dramatic, so we were really excited about how it was all working as kind of we had hoped. So that's always a great thing when you're visiting a shop. So here are just some images of the jets and the birds shooting off on the tips with the different discs. And again, shadows was another interesting thing. So again, we were able to model these kind of shadow effects in the computer model, but it was great to see that they do create shadow, but there's a little hint of color too in the shadow, which is kind of fun. So, and you can see kind of in this photo that the color, we hadn't really thought about the color kind of hitting the stainless steel, but that was a really cool effect too. And of course, this spinning disc thing and the connection detail to the disc. All little details. The finishes, Magnum presented us with different options for the blasting to get just the kind of right kind of fit. And I think we all were in agreement that this was the best kind of satiny blast finish that we could do. And then just testing the overall height. This is before they took them out to the site to stand them up. Make sure everything's working, and then went into installation. So this we weren't out. Sorry. Oh, in my throat. So drilling the footings. So they were able to coordinate with the general contractor on the streetscape project to kind of come in as things were still kind of in construction. So these footings went in way early, and then poured the footings. So those sat there for a while until we finished the fabrication of the sculptural pieces. Trucked out to site, hoisted up, set into the footings. Here's construction shots. And then of course the puzzle of all the discs going on, which colors go where. So they decided to install all these in the field rather than risk kind of transporting them with them on. There's the guys up there doing that, and then the whole grove kind of installed. So just some of the great effects that we really like. I think the mirror finish on the birds and the jets is really dramatic. The way it kind of reflects the sky and also catches light in different ways at different times. You can see sometimes it glows more, sometimes they kind of are a little more disappearing, but some really nice effects with the birds and the jets and the colored pieces swooping out. So here you can see this one's more reflective, and this one you can see how the kind of clouds are reflecting in the piece. So it's always kind of interesting and changing. And then just different views people can experience from the underside, kind of looking up to the spirals. And this, I believe community members sent this to Elizabeth and she forwarded us, but this was just showing at night how both the street lights and then in a full moon night, how the pieces glow at night too. So that was really fantastic to see. And I don't have it, but I remember someone sent a video too when it was windy and all the pieces are kind of moving around. So that was exciting to see too. So this is a great shot I think Greg took of the sun behind one of the pieces here. Oh, and then seating. So we had developed some designs for benches underneath, and then it ended up that at the time the city of Phoenix decided they didn't want any more benches in the city because they were worried about homeless people sleeping on them, is what I heard. I don't know the full story, but so we ended up the streetscape had used some of these boulders, so we went out and selected our own boulders that could be used for seats under the grove, so people could hang out there if they wanted. So that was kind of the last piece to get the boulders set in place underneath. So here's the completed, and this was fantastic to see. There's one of the birds kind of circling overhead, the sculptural birds. So I love that shot. It seemed to fit perfectly. So I think that's it.
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thanks so much. And we said kind of before we got started on the presentation that Laura and I we get to go down there next week and see the installed sculptures for the first time in real life. So that'll be exciting for us. So
That'll be awesome. Well, we have some questions in the chat box. I'm going to go through them and let you answer them. The first is a question for me. We'll come back to that one later. It's not that important. I was just excited about your piece in Jacksonville. Cheryl wants to know, how has the cloud piece held up from a maintenance aspect? Have any cables snapped or had to be replaced? Has there been more wind movement than you might have expected?
Well, the cables are fine, and there have been some discs that have come off in high wind. It's actually a lot windier out there than I think any of us anticipated, which we became aware of while we were installing it. So but there were like, I think 6,500 discs when we started, and it's some that are on the windward corners that have had trouble. So like these projects are all kind of big experiments in a way, and we made a mock-up and had it outside for 2 years, but we didn't. So so we try as much as we can to model the actual piece and test it. And so I think through that we got to a good solution, but even still some of the discs have broken. But the overall effect isn't really changed because there were so many, and that kind of glowing sun, I think, is what really that really continues to, for me, be the most compelling part. And yeah, so the 3form materials held up really nicely.
So you said some of the discs are broken. That's not. It's the swivel.
The swivel.
Yeah, we use
to the cable.
fishing swivels, high strength fishing swivels. And this is really funny, but we put the mock-up on top of my truck and went down to there's a small airport with an airport frontage road, and we actually did wind tests, like by driving really fast and filming them and to see how they'd behave in the high winds. So we could like basically, it was kind of like our own little wind tunnel.
Right. No one would let us do this in their wind tunnel because they didn't want to just have destruction tests. So anyway, so, we studied it as best we could, and there have been some that have come off, but, overall it's still very compelling. I mean, the same with the Sunspot too. Some people take the tags for souvenirs, and so every, 5 years or so, the city goes out and adds more.
Yeah, and sometimes we anticipate things like that, so we ordered like a lot of those extra silver pet tags for Sunspot, knowing that they would need to be kind of repopulated every so often. So.
The next question is, I'm interested to hear more about how your collaboration works. Do you co-work on all aspects of a project, or do you each have your own areas of expertise, and one focuses on the engineering or one focuses on fabrication? How does that work?
We're pretty equally collaborative in all aspects. I think on some projects, one of us will end up sort of taking the lead, and maybe that changes at different phases of the project, but it seems like one of us kind of becomes the de facto point of contact, and then does more of the interface. But I think on the creative process, we're usually we bounce ideas off each other and then kind of work pretty collaboratively. And I think we, on figuring out details, we both kind of do those aspects of it now, I think. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So it's definitely very collaborative in the beginning phases. And then, like Tom was saying, for the Uplift project, Tom kind of took the lead with communicating with the fabricators and working with Elizabeth. But so one of us is behind the scenes, usually by the end. And it really all depends on the project, honestly.
Great. The next one is a material question. What material did you use for the discs in Cloud and in Uplift? Is it the same material?
It was both of it was made by the company 3Form. The discs for Cloud were a product they call Eco Resin, which is a recycled acrylic. And then Uplift, we used polycarbonate.
It's a Coda XT is what they call the product, and it's incredibly strong and completely UV resistant, so you can get that luminous color, and they've got all the backup for 30 years of color retention and all that. And I think on the Phoenix one, because I know you guys do get these dust storms down there, so we wanted to make sure that the finish was something and the material was something that can stand being basically sandblasted. So it actually has, you could maybe see from some of those detailed photos, it has this, I think they call it stucco texture. So it's got a little bit of texture to it anyway, because we knew if it was like completely like smooth finished, you would probably start to see, some kind of, kind of weird dust and texture over time. So that finish we thought was the most durable for the environment.
But the finishes that they have maybe like 10 finish options, and they all do different things with light. So we do play with those finishes a lot. But the ones we've used in those two projects really are very luminous when they're backlit.
Cheryl has added that the Coda XT product is supposed to have Florida level hurricane strength approval as well.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
About the colors are so vibrant, and the colors that you've used here in Uplift are so different from the colors in Cloud. How do you come up with the palette? How do you determine the palette?
Well, I think, Tom talked about the, wanting to do a fade, and I think we
Yeah, but I think part of our reasoning in Phoenix was I think we wanted to go more on the cooler palette, just kind of create that sort of atmosphere of kind of a canopy, and so
the
blues,
oasis.
yeah,
and
so kind of
coolness.
blues and greens, kind of the cooling, and then
Mhm.
you know, of course, was connected to the underground irrigation system, so kind of trying to capture that kind of environment. So
Yeah. And then the cloud, it has such a three-dimensional quality to it that we decided to use mostly white and really play with like the depth and the shadows. And then on the bottom, we use some more vibrant sunset colors to kind of like define these kind of lobes of the cloud. So yeah, so I think, I mean, we really enjoy using color and thinking about it conceptually. And we love vibrant color for sure.
and I'll just have to share that for the cloud project, Laura created these transparencies of each level of where the disc would be located, and so these thousands of little dots of color, and then she literally was in there like pulling one pixel off and putting another colored pixel in to compose the thing in three dimensions. It was, yeah.
We did most of it in SketchUp, but then that final, it's like, oh, well, I'll just do this quickly, but it's like weeks of like.
Yeah, to kind of get the sun kind of coming on the edge of the clouds. If you've ever looked closely at a sunset, you kind of, the density of the cloud affects how the light kind of hits it. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, clearly you have an attention to detail that makes a difference in the work.
Yes.
After watching your presentation, I want to make sure that we get some video of the spinners in action. We need next time we have like some windy days, I want to go out there and make sure we get some video of them all whirring.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, and they're kind of, you know, we thought mostly they'd be more like wind vanes, you know, like kind of tipping and stuff like that. But it was a little bit of a surprise that someone actually captured like some actually spinning. So, I mean, we originally were thinking spinning when we had different ideas, but then we're like, oh, it'd be cool if they just kind of were shifting a little bit and stuff. But it sounds like some will spin depending on the wind angles. Of course, everything's at different wind angles to it, so they'll have some kind of moving in different ways at different times. So
Great. My question about the Jacksonville project, the first one you showed that you just finished, does it have black light on it? Is that what's making it glow like that?
No, it's just we've done a few murals where we use color changing lights in combination with the paint color to create kind of well, it's kind of like this color animation where a blue light will really bring out the magenta and blue paints and kind of make them glow. While at the same time it makes like the yellows and greens recede. So so I think in that image it was probably like violet light on the blue paint, but there's also some silver paint in that piece.
yeah, and
picks up
still,
the light.
and then stainless steel kind of spanning between the garage decks, and then the sculpture itself. This is something we've been using. These we take an LED node and we put it into an illuminated rod. So those kind of very colorful shaped rods. They're all clear during the day, but at night we're shooting color through them, but we can program each one of those rods differently, so we can get. So, you know, I didn't include any videos today, but if you go, I'm not sure if we have any on our website yet, we've got all kinds of effects going where colors are kind of moving around the piece and through the piece and radiating out and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty dramatic and colorful.
It's very cool. I mean, at first I thought that it was a sculpture and then a projection. Like I thought the image was projected on the building.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, people say that about there's a big one down in San Francisco called Bayview Rise, which is just the painted mural with these lights, and that's the first time we did that. And I think there's probably pictures on our website of it. It people want to go in and see how it kind of changes. But it does look like, it looks like projections, but it's not. It's just paint with the light changing. So like Laura said, the paint color will pop out when, you know, the lights are all one color. Everything else recedes and that color comes forward. So the images kind of move in and out.
So we spend a lot of time calibrating getting our color chips perfectly calibrated
Yeah.
with these.
Right. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, what's next for you guys? What project are you working on next?
We have a couple installations in Seattle this fall for the new Climate Pledge Arena, which is a historic arena in Seattle Center that's being basically like redeveloped to have an NHL team and other events. So we did an art plan initially, and now there are, I think, 9 artists doing commissions, and so we're doing a couple. The Access Lounge is kind of a gathering space that it's kind of a combines music and sports, but also references the lyrics of the Jimi Hendrix song "Bold as Love." So every color represents an emotion. So the different components of the piece are representing the colors. And then lighting installation. We're starting the project in Flagstaff, so that'll be,
There'll be a transit center coming in the future. So like we mentioned before the presentation, we'll be out there next week and stop in Phoenix and see Uplift, and then head up to Flagstaff for some meetings. And
and then we have a couple of projects in North Carolina too that we're going out to see some intersection paving murals installed and starting a new sculpture for a park in Cary, North Carolina. So I think those are the things we're working on these days. Yeah.
Awesome. Do we have any more questions from participants or team?
Well, I actually had a thought. You know, you featured, I guess, the work that Magnum had to do to turn your pipes into something that anybody would want to see. And, you featured at the time, there was a gentleman in a blue smock working on it, and that guy's name is Rory Lynn, and he performed magic on that material to get it to the point where it could go out in public. But you know, I have a quick question for you. It seems like a lot of your projects, since they're conceptually driven, rely on a lot of different fabricators and specialists to implement. I guess how early in your careers did you realize that you couldn't do it alone and that you needed other specializations to help fulfill your ideas?
I think honestly, like from the beginning, we did our first collaboration. We turned a classic convertible into we cut off the top, we sealed it, we spray painted it, we brought it to Los Angeles, filled it with dirt, and planted flowers, and you know it was like a $6,000 commission, and it's still like one of our favorite pieces, the Star Chief, but even then, like the larger projects, since we came from, we had both been trained in landscape architecture and just, I think, had a mindset that, you know, you work with a team of, you know, the fabricators and contractors, and I think that really allows us to do the bigger work, you know, like and so now we've got some really great relationships with fabricators that we work with over and over again, and engineers. And we, you know, the acrylic we've used now, you know, so while they're all kind of a little bit unique and solve different conditions, we do have some tried and true materials and fabricators that we go back to. But usually each project there's some new thing.
Yeah, and specialty fabricators, you know, certain people that, you know, they work only in plastics and they know everything you need to know about, you know, like working with these materials. And so they'll do a piece and, you know, and then that'll join up with like the bending rods in Jacksonville. Like that was a separate person. And then we brought them to the fabrication shop to integrate them into the metal sculpture.
Right. So I guess so we usually act like a general contractor and we'll find someone who can do the concrete and the lighting installations a lot of the time. And so we have a lot of subcontractors.
Yeah. But Magnum was great. We'd never worked with Magnum before, but we're definitely going to talk to them about like
Yeah.
upcoming projects because they were so fantastic. And it was really great that they were close to the site. And, so I think that really,
Mhm. They did
saved a lot of
foundation
money
work.
to just
Yeah.
to kind of be able to do it all and, not spend a lot of money on transport and stuff. So yeah, it worked out really well. So.
Mhm.
Well, unless there are other questions, I just want to thank you for taking some time today to talk with us and everybody else about your work. It was great to see the range of projects you've done in your career. It's
Yeah.
really been a privilege to work with you on the 107th Avenue project, and we look forward to seeing all the rest that you do going forward.
You're great. Thanks so much, Ed. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
Any final words, Katie, on
Thank you so much. There are several comments in the chat box from everyone about how beautiful your work is, and thank you for speaking with us today. So thank you from us and from our participants. And I'll get this posted up to YouTube and send you a link shortly.
All right. Thanks so much, Katie.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
stay tuned? Take care, all.
You too.